Veuillez maintenant évacuer la piste. Veuillez maintenant.
Sono le 16:30 e la corsa è in pieno svolgimento. È in testa la Ford numero 1 guidata da Gurney.
Veuillez maintenant.
3 p.m., the day before summer. The weather was cool and dry, but inside the cars about to compete in the grueling 24 hours of Le Mans, searing heat would soon test the limits of human endurance. Since 1923, Le Mans has been one of the most prestigious races in motorsports. Winning teams are undisputed lords of driving skill, mechanical ingenuity, and unshakable resolve. In approximately 1 hour, the racers will begin their quest for glory on this hallowed ground. The overall winner will complete 349 laps, a total of 2,900 miles, on the 8.4-mile Circuit de la Sarthe. Of the 55 cars that start, 31 will not finish. After the wails of high RPM engines fade away and the smells of smoke, rubber, and fuel begin to subside, a classic rivalry that held the racing world spellbound will be settled by this ultimate test. For many who remember this day, it was more than the 24 hours of Le Mans. It was Ferrari versus Shelby American. Enzo Ferrari's legendary machines were long reigning champions of the prototype and GT classes of Le Mans. At the 1963 race, Carroll Shelby entered 2 AC Cobras. Their best finish was 4th in GT, 7th overall. 1st through 6th overall went to Ferrari. For Shelby, it was a crushing blow. His Cobras, the most winning car in America at the time, had been humiliated by the Europeans. Despite the defeat, Carroll walked away with a valuable prize. For 24 hours he had watched his rival and learned what it would take to end their reign. Shelby saw that in the tight corners of the track, the Cobras were actually faster than the Ferraris. But this race was not being won in the turns. It was a treacherous section of the track, known as the Mulsanne Straight, where the Italians from Maranello had the edge. Back then, the Mulsanne was a high-speed 3.8-mile straightaway. It was a drag race inside a road race, a stretch of the course where speed records and lives were shattered. Of the 22 total driver fatalities in the 24 hours of Le Mans, over half occurred on the Mulsanne Straight. At the 1963 race, the Cobra's top speed on the straight was 150 miles per hour. The Italians were clocking close to 180. It was simple math. No matter how much faster the Cobras were in the turns, they were losing all their gains in the Mulsanne. Shelby and his team knew the Cobra already had the horsepower needed for the Mulsanne. It was a matter of air resistance. Even modified with hardtops, the Cobras just weren't designed to slice the wind like the sleek Ferraris. So there it was. Modify the Cobras to make them aerodynamic enough to slip by the Ferraris on the straight, and the Americans could restore their honor with the racing upset of the century. Of course, Ferrari had a factory filled with scores of brilliant engineers and designers. Shelby had a Santa Monica warehouse and half a dozen guys with protractors, duct tape, and crazy ideas. It was a classic David versus Goliath matchup. While David's deadly weapon was a sling, Shelby's was Peter Brock. One of Carroll's first employees, Brock was a former Art Center student and GM designer who worked on the Corvette Stingray. Carroll gave him the task of creating a completely new body to streamline the Cobra's silhouette. While driver Ken Miles sat holding the steering wheel, Pete shaped a plywood body around him. The most prominent feature, a tapering rear end that was abruptly cut off, was vilified by outside experts. They said Brock would need to make the tail much longer and more tapered. Shelby stuck with Pete's design and approved the coupe's new shape. After the Shelby team worked their own magic to mate the Cobra to the new body, it was time to go racing. Shelby entered the coupe in the 1964 Daytona Continental. A damaged differential kept it from finishing, but not before it recorded the fastest lap time at the race. Inspired by the car's debut at the iconic Florida track, Shelby christened it the Daytona Coupe. After a win at Sebring 3 weeks later, the team was ready for the rematch with Ferrari. Two of the coupes were entered in the 1964 24 Hours of Le Mans, number 5 and number 6. On the first day of practice, driver Dan Gurney turned the fastest GT lap ever recorded there. The team clocked Gurney and co-driver Bob Bondurant at 197 miles per hour on the Mulsanne straight. But Enzo was ready. He'd seen what the coupes had done at Daytona and Sebring and entered 4 Ferraris with his latest 250 GT engines, the best ever from the Maranello factory. As the world watched, a regal stallion and a deadly snake began their dance with destiny. At first, the Viking Blue coupes appeared to easily overtake Enzo's Rosso Corsa machines. But 10 hours into the race, Daytona Coupe number 6 was disqualified when the pit crew jumped its dead battery. All hope for the Americans was now pinned on one car, Coupe number 5, driven by Bob Bondurant and Dan Gurney. It was Gurney's 4th attempt at a Le Mans victory and Bondurant's 1st. Both were champion world-class drivers. As the race wore on, Shelby was on edge. Coupe number 5 had never been road tested until tech inspection and first practice. Working 4 days non-stop, the Shelby team had built it from scratch in a garage near the track. Now it was trading paint with 4 Ferraris in one of the greatest racing duels of all time. At 4 a.m., disaster struck. Gurney was losing oil pressure. Pit crewmen Phil Remington and John Stuckey were forced to bypass the oil cooler, losing precious time in the pits. As the veil of darkness lifted at sunrise, deep scars of a battle between machines, exhaustion, and mortality itself were revealed. Scars that would become cherished badges of triumph or painful reminders of failure within hours. At 1:30 p.m., the team changed drivers for the last time, with 2.5 hours left in the race. It would be up to Bondurant to pilot the wounded coupe for the coveted Le Mans win. At 4 p.m. on June 21, 1964, Bob Bondurant crossed the finish line. It was official. The unbeaten Ferrari was handed an epic loss. Shelby Daytona Coupe number 5 finished first in the GT class and a stunning 4th overall. The coupe's only real competition came from the highest class on the track, the prototypes. The Italian stallions had been corralled. And with the Shelby Daytona Coupe, a new era of race car design was unleashed. "50 years after its vanquishing win at Le Mans, the Shelby Daytona Coupe has come to be revered as much more than a race car. It was motorsport's Apollo 11, a rocket built and raced by dreamers with the courage to brave the impossible and reach for the immortality of history."